I'll call to order the special city council meeting for May 11th. And if you'd all stand and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance after me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Francisco. Hotchkiss. Here. Murillo. Rouse. Here. White. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Hart.
Here.
Mayor Schneider is absent.
Are there any public comments? Anyone that would like to speak on anything that isn't on the agenda today? And since there's no one in the room, that will just go to the first item on the agenda, which is the next year's budget. Ms. Rapp? Oh, do you need to read that? Yes, sorry.
Proposed two-year financial plan for fiscal years 2016 and 2017.
Mayor Hart and council members, Nancy Rapp, Parks and Recreation Director, and we are pleased to be here once again to submit our department budget for your consideration. And I have a number of staff with me today. Some are presenting, others are here to answer specific questions that you might have. So our recommended fiscal year 2016 and 2017 budget includes the Creeks Fund, the Golf Fund, the General Fund, and Capital, and that's kind of the order that we'll be going in. And a quick overview of the department budget. We're almost $23 million proposed for FY16 with the three funds, and we also have a small percentage of fund in the miscellaneous fund for grants, donations. The department has a total of 100 FTE. And the most amazing number for all of us when we totaled it up together is we have 157 hourly hours in our department budget. 157,000. Thank you for that correction. And it's just a reminder that so much of what we do is seasonal work, and also it's how we plug people in. And so starting off the presentation today will be Cameron Benson, the Creeks manager, providing information on the proposed Creeks budget. He'll be followed by Mark Sewell, our business analyst, who will be presenting the Golf Fund budget. And then Jill Zachary will walk you through the general fund budget and also our recommended general fund capital. I'll come back in and wrap up with a couple of items, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So with that, we'll turn it over to Cameron.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, and good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm going to be presenting the FY16 and 17 budget for the Creeks Division. And I'm going to start off with our revenue numbers. As you know, most of the funding for the Creeks Division comes from the voter-approved Measure B. The Finance Department is forecasting an increase in Measure B revenues over the next couple of years, so that's good news. One thing I want to point out on the revenues is that although we have pending grant applications, we do not include grant revenue in our budget forecast, and that's just because they're competitive grants. They're very competitive, and so it would be too speculative for us to really rely on those numbers, but they're always great when they come in. I'll talk about that a little more later. On the expenditure side, our FY16 and 17 budgets are substantially similar to FY15, our current year budget. The FY16 budget is slightly less, and the FY17 proposed budget is slightly more than FY15. The Creeks Division has three main program areas: water quality improvement, creek restoration and outreach and education. And this graph or chart breaks the budget into those categories and also further into our capital program. Some key initiatives for the Creeks Division in the coming year include the implementation of our water quality research and monitoring plan. We do weekly monitoring in the creeks and the beaches. We also do storm sampling, hopefully, if there's storms next year. And we have an additional research program. In the next year, we're going to be looking at pesticide that we've been finding frequently in our creeks. It's a neonicotinoid pesticide, and we're trying to determine where that came from so we can stop it from getting into the creeks. We are also planning to increase our creek cleanup efforts. We've seen an increase in homeless encampments along the creek, and we're putting additional effort into cleaning those areas up and moving people out of the creek. We're also increasing cleanup efforts along the water line, all along the beach from East Beach to Ledbetter. Right now, we're out once a week cleaning up trash along the shoreline, and we're going to increase that as a pilot effort as twice a week. And we'll see if we'll check our cost benefit on that and see if we're doubling the amount of trash we're taking off the beach. We also have some activity in our capital program. We have stormwater treatment retrofit projects. These are permeable paver demonstration projects. We've done several of them in parking lots. Now we're moving out to do demonstrations in some of the other urban hardscapes. So we have projects that we're going to be constructing this summer in Plaza de Veracruz Park in the service road through the park. It serves sort of as an alleyway. We're also going to be replacing the sidewalks around Alice Keck Park Memorial Gardens with permeable pavers. That construction will start in June at Plaza Veracruz and finish sometime in the winter at Alice Keck Park Gardens. And then in FY17, we're going to be doing a full street replacement on Quarantina Avenue down by the Santa Barbara Junior High campus. We also have a project we're working on Las Positas Creek. That's one of the main tributaries to Arroyo Burro. Running along Las Positas just below Modoc Road, you can see from the road a concrete channelized portion of the creek. We're looking at taking out that concrete channel and restoring it as a natural creek there. And then lastly, I wanted to mention in December of 2013, we purchased a 14-acre property up in the upper Arroyo Burro watershed just above Foothill, and we are working on our restoration plan for that project and plan to be ready for construction by next summer or next fall. This table shows the full capital improvement program list for the Creeks Division and the proposed appropriation for those projects. All of these projects have been funded in past capital improvement program budgets. This slide shows how the Creeks Capital Improvement Program is funded. The green in the slide shows the funding that comes from Measure B, and the pink portion of those bars is the grant funding we've received through those different fiscal years. Each year from FY10 through FY15 are showing actual numbers, and FY16 is a projection. So as you can see, the Creeks Division staff's been very successful at leveraging the Measure B dollars with grant funding for the capital program. And we've received over $17 million in grant funding since the Creeks Division started in 2001.
Quick question, if I could. In fiscal year 14, we got no grant funding?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss. If you look very carefully, we didn't get completely skunked in 14, but there's a tiny bar up there.
Okay.
We got a $10,000 grant that year. Actually, we were awarded a $2 million grant that year, but it wasn't appropriated until FY15, so we have $2.3 million in 15.
Yeah, that's pretty hard to see.
But you can see that It definitely changes year after year. That's a good example of why we don't forecast those grant revenues and balance our budget with them.
Yes, good point.
As we're going forward. I wanted to just highlight a few of our FY16 performance measures. The Creeks Division is responsible for water quality enforcement under the municipal code, and so we have a performance objective of a 95% response rate within 1 working day. Our current performance objective is to have that response rate within 3 working days, and we're just getting out there on the first day, so we're going to make that our objective now. We also are planning to remove 20,000 square feet of the invasive giant reed, Arundo donax. We're working in Arroyo Burro right now on that, and that's another one where we've increased from 5,000 square feet to 20,000 square feet just based on what we think we're going to accomplish in the coming year. And then lastly, a new performance objective for us is to inspect and clean 20 miles of city creeks each year. And we do a lot of cleanup work in the creeks. We remove over 55 tons of trash each year from the creek channels, and this is going to help us see almost the entire reach of all the creeks in the city. And then finally, the proposed budgets were presented to the Creeks Advisory Committee and the Parks and Recreation Commission at their April meetings, and each of those bodies recommended to council to their support for these proposed budgets. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Benson? Councilmember Rouse?
Thank you, Mayor Hart. Mr. Benson, you talked about the encampments along the river, and I know there's been a lot over the years in the Las Positas Valley particularly. When you remove trash, are you able to remove that as well? Does that take a police action? How does that work for you guys?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, sometimes it involves the police. The city has a policy for lost and abandoned property along the creek, so if we find an active encampment, we will post the encampment. We need to give a 48-hour notice. Usually that's effective at having somebody move on, and then a lot of debris is left in the site, and then we clean up that site. What we've had to do, we're actually having a large number of encampments on Mission Creek lately and in particular areas. And what we've started to do now is sort of a rolling posting where we're out, we're sending somebody out daily to do a posting and then sending out a cleanup crew 48 hours later to those locations. And what we find is if we can keep that level of effort going for 3 weeks straight, we can kind of clear out an area for a while. Sometimes it does feel a little dangerous, or it is difficult to get someone to move on, and the police department has been helpful in those kinds of cases.
Councilmember White?
Thank you, Mayor. The Arundo, there's a program. Is it the Ag Commissioner that has a program? Can you talk about what interaction there is? Do we benefit from that Ag Commissioner effort as well? Can you?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember White, the answer is yes. We've been partnering with the Ag Commissioner's office now for several years. It's been a very successful partnership. We usually end up hiring the California Conservation Corps staff to do some of the labor work. The Ag Commissioner's office has received grants over the past several years to do that work, but they didn't have the ability to actually move the project forward, so we've been able to come in and take that role. That does bring up kind of one of the things about our grant program. We have been looking for opportunities to partner with other agencies for grants, and even where the other agency has the grant. So over the last 2 years, we've been able to use $150,000 in grants from the Agricultural Commissioner's office that has substituted for Measure B funds that we actually had budgeted to do the same work. So that doesn't show up on our grant totals, but it does show up on our use of our funds that we've budgeted for certain work.
Councilman Trzaskowski?
Thank you, sir. quick question. Do we rake all our beaches regularly?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Hotchkiss, I think I'll turn that over to.
Have I
Zachary.
asked that too early? I should wait for you. I'll hold off then. Let's don't. Second question
Parks
is
Division does that.
why? What was the reason that the Las Positas Channel was originally concretized? Was it for flood control purposes?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember Hotchkiss, I believe that's the reason. As we're going through and looking at our design, we are ensuring that we have the same or additional flood protection in that area. We are looking at the possibility of taking a number of homes in that area out of the 100-year floodplain if we're able to do that.
I see. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Ms. Zachary?
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Hotchkiss, I will jump in and answer that question. We both rake or groom our beaches depending on the time of year. Raking occurs in the winter months and grooming in the summer months. And we have very defined areas of East Beach that we groom, West Beach, and Ledbetter. And it is permitted by the California Coastal Commission under the city's waterfront sediment management plan.
So there are some areas that we just leave alone?
That's correct.
Okay, because I get complaints every now and then. Gee, they never rake the beach, and I think they are probably looking at the areas you're talking about. Where are the ones that we do not rake?
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Hotchkiss, we are not able to rake below the high water tide line. So you might be referring to Ledbetter Beach right now, which has quite a bit of kelp on it.
Yeah.
When there's kelp there in those locations, we do not touch that area. It's sensitive habitat, and so we leave it alone. And then we also monitor and groom based on bird surveys that we do for the western snowy plover and take into account grunion spawning habitat. Another area that people might notice isn't as groomed as other areas is right around the Laguna Channel outfall. That section of East Beach, it's much rockier. It's an area that we don't actively rake. And then also areas east, we obviously don't go within 200 feet of the center line of either creek outfall. So a lot of it has to do with where we have active recreation, which is a primary objective of the program, yet also being sensitive to the habitat and species that are there. So it's a balance between the two.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sewell, are you up next? Is that how it's going? Thank you.
Mayor Hart, council members, Mark Sill, business analyst for Parks and Recreation, pleased to deliver to you the proposed budget for the Golf Fund for fiscal year 16 and 17. Lovely picture of the golf course there, taken about a month ago. So I thought I'd start with the highlights for the budget. And over the last year, we've been before you a number of times discussing the financial plight of the golf course as it currently stands, and some of the actions taken from those discussions are included within this budget, and they include the refinancing of the golf course debt with the general fund. They include the increasing of the marketing funding, which within our assumptions we've included a moderate increase in rounds and the revenue therefore. We've also had a look at the greens fees structure and looked at some opportunities to discount some fees in order to help to grow the game of golf. That's something that a number of golf courses are looking at to see how we can keep those younger people interested in golf post junior into their 20s. We've looked where we can to reduce our permanent staffing from our current levels, and that was one of the challenges that we took back. And finally, the thing to say here is that the second year of the 2-year budget that you'll see at the moment does not reflect any of the proposed changes in terms of the operating model that we've received direction to go and look at. That work is currently ongoing. There are still many questions to be answered. So for the time being, what we have done is we've assumed a status quo, and of course we'll be back before you with any RFP and any savings that therefore are likely in terms of the operating model as a mid-year budget adjustment for fiscal year 17. Okay. So some key initiatives. We do have the need to secure new operators to run the golf course for us. We currently have 2 concessionaires, one for the restaurant and one for the pro shop. Their contracts currently expire in June 30, 2016, which is the end of fiscal year 16. So we will be looking to see what we need to do with those 2 contracts. I've already mentioned we've looked to enhance and to utilise some smarter marketing. There is an RFP on the street at the moment to help us to achieve that. And we are recognising we need to continue to invest in capital at the golf course. Lastly, we're a golf course, we're in Santa Barbara, and we're in a record drought, so clearly how we manage our water is extremely important to us, and we are doing everything we can to make sure we are compliant with all the regulations while still looking to keep a wonderful product for the golfers to come and enjoy. So I thought I'd throw up a chart. I like a chart. And this shows us the greens fees and the rounds over the last few years, with the solid lines being actuals and then the dots being where do we think we're going to go. And you can see that the yellow line being the rounds, we took a big drop from fiscal year 9 to 10 to do with recession and also construction on the golf course. And since then, we've been yo-yoing around the sort of 62,000 round mark. So we are, as I say, proposing to have some moderate growth from fiscal year 15 and fiscal year 16 as a result of increased marketing. And we're also proposing moderate price increases on average, which help the revenue line to grow even with stable rounds. And here are the numbers. So greens fee revenue is about 85% of the total revenue taken at the golf course. And you can see there that we're actually proposing a revenue on greens fees for fiscal year 16, which is lower than the adopted budget for 15. And that's partly in the fact that we're expecting in fiscal year 15 to end the year about $90,000 below budget. So although it looks like it's a decline, it is from budget, but it will be growth from where we're actually projecting to end the year. And then our restaurant and pro shop concessions, they're following the same assumptions in terms of greens fees and rounds. There are some general movements in there that relate to changes in contract terms, and the assumption would be that any extra golf rounds would likely drive any extra concession revenue. The restaurant is doing particularly well, and therefore we feel confident that we can show a little bit more growth there. The line, the greens fee revenue I've talked about. The next one I wanted to just draw your attention to is the other revenue, and that might look curious as to why that's jumping up significantly. Now, this is the way the accounting department has chosen to deal with the debt refinance. And so what we have, and you'll see it in a latter slide with regards to the expenses, is the debt line has actually remained unchanged. So the appropriations and the expenditures from the Golf Fund for the debt remain unchanged. However, the general fund is providing the Golf Fund with $180,000 in support of the payments for that debt. So it comes in as a revenue and it goes out as a cost. And in reality, what that means is the net debt cost to the Golf Fund is $80,000 and achieves, in essence, the same thing as refinancing all of the debt. Okay, so that was the direction from the accounting department, and that's why you see the increased revenue of $180,000 there. Here are the costs, and what I would like to say here is that there's the debt cost line. You can see you might have expected to see that drop down, but again, we're seeing a revenue come in of $180,000, which offsets the majority of that debt cost. Supplies and services, the thing to note here, that the majority of that line is actually water. About $240,000 of the $464,000 for 17 and $471 for 16 is water. And the assumption in this budget, as we propose it to you, is that they are on consistent water rates with stage 2. Should council decide to enact rates with regards to the desalination plant, and that would likely cost the golf course on a similar amount of water an extra $80,000 per annum per fiscal year. Okay, so it's not included in that number, and therefore that would have an impact in terms of more cost to the Golf Fund. And then where it really makes the difference is in the use of or the addition to the reserves. And you can see that the proposed budget for FY16 at the moment, even with refinancing the debt and the assumption that the marketing investment will grow the rounds moderately, the Golf Fund is projected to use nearly $50,000 of reserves. If we get the desalination water rates, that jumps up to $130,000 of reserves. Now, we go into the year under policy in terms of our reserves, and therefore that will have a significant impact and speaks to the reasons why we've been before you with regards to our fiscal challenges. Obviously, by the time we get to FY17, we'd be expecting to be putting a set of more favourable numbers up there with regards to the expectations from the operational option changes. So with regards to the...
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Rouse.
Thank you. Salaries and benefits. When we spoke earlier, that was a targeted mode discussion. And does this reflect the proposed changes to the structure? It does not.
No. Mayor Hart and Councilmember Rouse, this is on a status quo basis with the exception of a few opportunities that staff were able to take under the existing model.
So that number could be different at some
When we return next year with our mid-cycle budget, you would expect to see a dramatically different salary and benefit number.
Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the green fees, an area where a lot of our golfers are obviously particularly interested. We are, in general, looking to increase most of our green fees by $1, and that's a roughly 3% increase. And this increase would be due to take place in January 2016. So we're looking to have our fee increases now on calendar year basis, not fiscal year basis.
That's per round, correct? $1 increase per round.
Correct.
Thank you.
We are proposing no changes to the junior rates and to tournaments. And then what I'll do is I'll just speak to some of the other ones which aren't necessarily $1. We are looking to increase our annual rewards membership by $3 to $130. I've already mentioned that we're looking to reduce some fees in order to grow the game of golf. Young adults in this context has been defined as anyone between the age of 18 and 25. Currently, a junior rate would apply to anyone under 18 is $13. As soon as they turn 18, we're asking them to pay up to $40. It's a big jump. And what we're seeing in the golf world is that a lot of junior involvement in play, and then suddenly they turn 18 and it becomes a real challenge. So we're looking to harmonise the rate that young adults would have with the senior rate, those who are over 65. Resident rates, we are looking to extend those to anyone who lives within the Tri-County area. Currently, it's only Santa Barbara County residents who receive our resident rate. That can be a 40% discount. And some of our closest competitors already offer these discounts to people in other counties, and we feel that's an opportunity to win some of that share. And then finally, the other change is to mention is that we're looking to have one twilight rate and one super twilight rate. These are rates which apply later in the day when you might not get around the full 18. They're heavily discounted, but we're looking to harmonise them. So irrespective of how old you are, you would pay the same rate for those discounted rounds. Moving on to capital. We are proposing to spend $265,000 in fiscal year 16 and $255,000 in fiscal year 17. These are consistent with the numbers that we've used for previous projections for the health of the Golf Fund. 4 main areas we're looking to invest. The first area is Players Improvement Fund. This number here is calculated by attributing $1 for every paid round into a fund that the golfers can have an influence, direct influence over how that money is invested to improve the golf course for the players. Projects are identified by a subcommittee to the GAC, the Golf Advisory Committee, and are then voted on and put forward subject to staff approval. And we have already invested in some new tee boxes and some new bunker sand, and a project is underway for renovating a number of tee boxes in fiscal year 16. That's already been approved by the GAC. Green and tee renovation. It's not just the Players Improvement Fund who will be looking to invest in greens and tees. We recognise that they are the lifeblood of the golf course. They are the things that golfers really enjoy. We're looking to spend money in there. And we are looking to improve our irrigation. And finally, we need to invest in our infrastructure, some of the areas that the golfers don't tend to see, but unfortunately are extremely necessary to the well-being of the golf course to make it run. A couple of highlights from the P3s. And this really speaks to the key assumptions. You can see that the revenue per round we are projecting to be growing from fiscal year 14 all the way through fiscal year 16, and that's in recognition of the price increase in the main. And then the maintenance costs, we're doing everything we can to control those costs, and the maintenance cost is actually projected and proposed to reduce slightly by 9 cents per round. And that, again, is in part to do with the fixed cost nature of the maintenance costs and the growing volume that we're proposing. Our Golf Advisory Committee, at their regular meeting on April the 8th, approved the recommended operational and capital budgets for fiscal year 16 and 17, and fees and charges, with one exception. On a 4-1 vote, they declined the proposal to increase the annual rewards card by $3. And then at the Parks and Recreation Commission, the Commission voted unanimously to accept the proposed budget in full, including the increase to the rewards card. And that is the end of my presentation. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Mr. Sewell? Councilmember Murillo.
What was the issue with the rewards card, Mr. Sewell?
Mayor Hart, Councilmember Murillo. The GAC chose not to approve the increase on the rewards card on the basis that they felt the rewards card is generally bought by the most loyal customers at the golf course. The rewards card does entitle each customer to discounts on golf and other things in the pro shop. And the general feeling was, because green fees are increasing by $1, they felt that it was like a double price increase. The $3 is based over an annual fee, and the rewards card is currently $127 and would go to $130.
How many people pay that fee, approximately?
Mayor Hart, we currently have about 390 members.
So it's a little more than $1,000 in revenue
Correct.
for the year. Okay. Any other questions? I had a question about the chart that has the greens fee revenue per round and the maintenance cost per round. Are those total numbers inclusive of everything? The capital costs for is it just maintenance, or does that roll up all of the costs for the?
Mayor Hart, it's
operation?
not every single cost associated with the running of the golf course. It's the costs which are attributed to the maintenance area. So, for example, marketing would not be included in that ratio. Professional services would not be included in that ratio. But it would include the capital.
And the revenue side is all the revenues. That's this total number of rounds divided by total greens revenues?
Greens revenue divided by total rounds.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Hotchkiss?
What is the cost of a round now? So we're looking at $26.57 out of $40, $30?
Mayor Hart, Councilmember Hodgkiss. That's obviously an average based on the mix of the players.
I realize.
If you're an adult, and that means between 18 and 65, during the week you're paying about $35, $36, and weekend up to $40. If you're a senior, it's about $7 or $8 less than that.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. Ms. Zachary, are you next?
Mr. Mayor, council members. There we go. General fund budget overview. In addition to creeks and golf, Parks and Recreation plays a diverse role in the community, whether it's our parkland, developed or open spaces, our playgrounds, our community facilities, our beaches, community gardens, street trees, park trees, facilities. As we all know, we extend the work that we do throughout Santa Barbara, and the facilities we manage represent almost half of those that are in the general fund today. When we look at our programs and services, through our activity registrations, we recently have served 13,000, over 3,200 youth in after-school programs. In our parks and facilities, we have 7,500 reservations, active use of our facilities by both Santa Barbara residents and Santa Barbara visitors. And then community service programs, whether it's food distribution or other types of services that could get provided through our neighborhood centers. Just as a brief overview. When we developed our budget strategy for these 2 fiscal years, we took a number of steps. We first looked at our existing programs and evaluated their performance. We looked at opportunities to enhance services, either because we heard it from a community need or we felt it growing. We also been looking at identifying opportunities to increase revenues, which we do on an annual basis, and then looking at our program resources, making sure that the resources are in the right place to provide the services and ensure that we deliver the programs. And then, as we've done in recent years, continue to review our park and recreation facility deferred maintenance projects and options to enhance those facilities. keeping in mind we want to serve Santa Barbara today and its community members today, but then also planning for the future as we think ahead. So to that end, the key initiatives for the general fund for the next 2 years include some program reallocations to address efficiency and effectiveness needs. We've looked at opportunities and will present restoring and enhancing services that we have. We've used a point-of-sale software for many, many, many years that's about to sunset, and it's our opportunity to upgrade that and bring it into today's computer user. That is a key initiative for the next 2-year cycle. And then expanding our capital and planning projects over the past 3 or 4 years as Council has reinvested in Parks and Recreation. We have proposals to continue that. We have some really key projects that are currently underway. At the same time, looking at our marketing, just as with the golf course, we are constantly looking at ways to improve our marketing. Revenue is a key factor in our department's budget and how we can improve our marketing initiatives to increase those revenues. Looking at the general fund portion of the department, our proposed budget is just over $16.4 million for FY16 and just over $17 million for FY17. Essentially, the difference between 16 and 17 related to scheduled salary and benefit adjustments. The budgets essentially are the same. As you can see, we do have a large amount in supplies and services. That has to do with contracts and services that the department provides in addition to its maintenance of city facilities. And then allocated costs are a key cost in our department because we have so many different facilities that are managed, so many different vehicles, other things that enable us to do our jobs. Looking at the 3 divisions, the Parks Division has the largest budget. It includes parks, forestry, street medians, and parkways, and beaches. Recreation, as you know, is a very diverse division with the various programs and services that we provide, as well as facility rentals and cultural and community events. And then administration as the 3rd division. Looking at our divisions in the form of a pie chart, administration represents 8% of the general fund budget, recreation 43%, and parks 49%. Our total proposed FTEs are 80.9, so just under 81. And as Ms. Rapp mentioned, we have a large hourly base, almost 130,000 hours, largely to do with our recreation programs, both summer programs and through the school year. So some of the major budget changes that we're proposing for 16 and 17 have to do with personnel, and we're proposing 4 position reallocations. I should first start saying the majority of what we're proposing is within our existing appropriations. So we looked at our budgets, we looked at where funding was allocated, and as I will explain in the next couple of slides, tried to figure out how we could both address efficiency and effectiveness within the department as things change. Also reflect actual workload, because as staff move from one program to another, we move that staff person to be housed in that program. And then looking at opportunities to restore positions that over time, fiscal year 10 and 11 being fairly the significant ones in fiscal year 9, to be able to come back and provide the level of service that we haven't provided in a number of years. So one of those proposals within our existing appropriations is to reclassify an existing position to restore a business manager, and that position was eliminated in fiscal year 10. It responds to a growing need as we effectively manage different areas of our budget and looking at the different technology expansions that we're doing. I mentioned the class software, what we're working with at the golf course. It's elevated our need to support that position. And then restoring 2 positions in recreation, and then proposing 2 positions that are partly funded with existing appropriations and then also partly funded with the opportunity to provide service enhancements. So just a little bit more information for council. Within our existing appropriations, we have 1.8 FTEs. These 2 positions would restore ones that previously existed prior to the budget reductions. The first is an office specialist for our tennis, youth activities, and sports programs. The work effort of this position is to support all of those programs through program registrations, response to customer queries, providing general program support for the staff that are actually physically implementing the programs. We've been using hourly staff, which are part-time staff, and so there's changeover that's more frequent that makes it sometimes difficult to recruit and retain staff. And we'd like to convert those hourly salary dollars into a permanent staff person. So we'd have a permanent staff person providing support to those programs rather than a variety of hourly staff that come and go. That'll ensure increased program effectiveness and efficiency and be able to maintain the level of service and increase it that we'd like to provide. Similarly, the head lifeguard for Los Baños Pool has been a priority since 2010. We haven't been able to formally propose it as part of a budget, in part because of trying to determine how we would make it work. Some recent changes, including the contract agreement we have with the Santa Barbara Swim Club, which requires a city staff member to be on site as lifeguard services when their programs are going on, has resulted in additional revenue, which will help support this position. And then also converting hourly staff hours to be able to support this position. It'll do a number of things. One, it'll meet the need of our contract with Santa Barbara Swim Club, but it'll also improve safety, facility operation, and customer service, which we'll have people there that are permanent staff earlier in the day, so for longer hours of the day. Something goes wrong at Los Baños, and it's not a permanent staff person who's responsible. Someone has to come in off hours to address it. With the service enhancements, the department prioritized two positions. The first is a capital projects supervisor, and the second is a recreation specialist. Our proposal includes using some of that new funding for each of these positions, and then using some existing appropriations to fully fund those positions. Again, we had a capital project supervisor for our project management team, and that position was eliminated with the budget reductions. At the time, the department had a declining capital program, and the ability for the city to invest in capital had declined substantially. We're proposing to restore it for a number of reasons. One, we have some very key capital projects, large capital projects that are underway. We have many more that we anticipate are in the pipeline. Our workload has grown extensively. This position would be responsible for some of the more complicated capital projects. They would also oversee the 3 staff that we have in that program, and then also be involved in capital program budget and management and provide support to that work. We have advanced a number of projects, and we look forward to continuing to advance them to be able to respond to the community priority for this position. The recreation position is a 0.8 full-time equivalent. Again, this is another example of where the departments prioritize the generation of revenue, and particularly for contract programs and classes. We've seen declines in recent years as a result of some staffing challenges and shortage of staffing. This would restore a position that once existed. It would be dedicated for that purpose. Most of the funding for this position is part of our proposal for service enhancements, but we are funding some of it from our existing appropriations. Just to review where the department was in 2008 and where we would be in 2016 and 17 with our proposed additional staff. It puts us just under 81, whereas in 2008 we were at 84 permanent staff in the general fund for the department. Looking at revenue for the department, Recreation Division clearly plays the largest role in bringing revenue in at just over $3.6 million proposed for 16 and 3.7 for 17. That is a slight increase over prior years. Parks revenue is largely associated with the contracts and services that the Parks Division provides for various programs in the city. And then the Administration Division revenue is associated with our project management team and the revenue that comes in for capital projects. Every year we look at our fees. The department has 629 fees, and most of those are recreation fees. We evaluate them to see whether they're market rate. We look at programs and determine if we're going to continue them, what the fee structure should be. If they're being eliminated, clearly the fee goes away, or if we're adding new programs. For 16 and 17, well, 16 I should say, we're proposing moderate increases for some fees. Of the 629, 505 are not proposed to change at all. This slide is intended to give council a sense of what that fee range might be. You know, a high of 11% for pre and post summer camp care is really a change in $4 from $36 to $40. The adult soccer team fee is 10%, going from $400 to $440. This is a work effort that staff undertakes with all seriousness and really looks at what's appropriate, what makes sense, and responds to the market, and then also the cost to provide the service as well. Key capital. We have a number, as I mentioned earlier, of major renovation projects underway. Cabrillo Pavilion and Bathhouse. Council will get an update on that likely in June or July as we come forward with our a contract for our lead commissioning agent. We recently submitted for our coastal development permit and anticipate that that project will move forward to the Planning Commission probably in August. So we're well on our way to keeping that project moving so that we can get to a construction phase. Cabrillo Ballpark, we've been given direction from the Parks and Recreation Commission to move forward with looking at 3 recreation alternatives as well as other improvements for the Cabrillo Ballpark. We're about to recommend a contract for design services to council, and that should be coming forward soon. We recently opened our new pocket park at Bath and Ortega Street after so many years, and would be happy to report that it seems to be very well used already, and so it's a great success. Similarly, recreation infrastructure enhancements. We've had a number of projects underway that, again, we'll also be proposing for new funding in the next 2-year cycle. Turf improvements, irrigation replacement projects, playgrounds. But we've also been preparing for new projects. Off-leash dog areas, we did a feasibility analysis and presented it to the Parks and Recreation Commission. So we're preparing in anticipation of if a future project came along, we'd be ready to actually move forward with it. And then playground renovation replacement continues to be a high priority for the department. The proposed capital for fiscal year 16 and 17, these projects are ones that are either projects or programs that we currently have something that we're working on, so I won't go on in detail about them, or they would enhance a program that maybe hadn't been funded for a year or two. For example, restroom renovations, we did a number of them for a number of years, and then haven't in the past year or so, so this would focus on one that we've had in the pipeline for quite a while. Cabrillo Ball Field, we're proposing irrigation system renovation funds. Council did approve quite a bit of funding for that project. It didn't include the irrigation system, so we always knew we would be coming back to ask for that funding. Chase Pond Park, we've got some safety issues we'd like to address as quickly as possible. And then 1,000 Steps, similar to Mesa Lane Steps, we can get ourselves through final plans and permits. We believe we could be in a very good position to seek outside funding to actually solve the problem, whatever that solution might ultimately be. And then new capital projects. The department's had a priority, and the commission has also voiced this as well, in undertaking a new master plan. It's identified in the city's general plan. We haven't done this since the late 70s, early 80s. As a department, we're increasingly asked by the community to look at different types of recreation activities we don't currently provide, like off-leash dog areas, fenced ones, and then also look at ways to enhance other recreation opportunities, like can we build another area for kids to skate? Every time we're asked that question, we look at our whole system, have to look at our whole system and go, well, what would work where and how? A master plan would actually give us the ability to look at it comprehensively and plan for the future over the long term. Artificial sports fields, we've been currently assessing what's going on at Bonet Park. We're proposing to expand that work to include Dwight Murphy. Median and parkway landscape renovation, the Parks and Recreation Department took on management of city medians and parkways, the ones we maintained last year. One of our key objectives is to come up with some very clear design standards, design concepts, so that as we go in and renovate in the future, when the drought is over, and develop new ones, there's a systematic plan for what type of landscaping and how it's maintained. So So our landscapes and medians look better for longer and are easier to manage. And just the last two, urban forest management plan implementation. Since council adopted that last April, we've been looking at ways to implement small elements of it. This would go towards our street tree master plan update. And then also strategically looking at parkways where we can improve them to support existing trees and reduce infrastructure conflict that we have. And then lastly, I mentioned the off-leash dog area. If funded, we would move forward with actually trying to build one in one of our park areas. Just to wrap up the remarks that I'm making, some administration P3 highlights. As the administration division, we're responsible for some more of the larger strategic efforts for the department, such as the strategic drought response plan. We also manage our capital improvement program, and then gather in and have objectives related to donations and grant support from outside organizations and volunteer support. In recreation, service to youth, to adults, to participants in various programs and clinics continues to be a priority, and our performance measures reflect that. How we choose and focus the resources we have to serve as many people as we can. Continuing to serve adults in sports, youth in our job apprentice program, and then summer camps, spring camps, and clinics as examples. In the Parks Division, we do a lot of volunteer projects. That's critical to both community support for our parks and then also to get jobs done. We also maintain our street trees, and we have a goal every year that we're planning to maintain. Councilmember Hodgkiss asked about our beach grooming cycles earlier. We do 10 every year, and we also do 6 raking cycles. So the raking in the winter, the grooming in the summer, to give you a sense. Grooming's more important in the summer months since there are more people on the beach. And then I mentioned some of these other programs in my earlier remarks. Just to conclude before turning it back to Nancy Rapp, the Parks and Recreation Commission did consider our proposed budget, our fees and charges, and capital program on April 22nd and recommended that they be forwarded to council. Thank you.
Councilmember Rouse has a question, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Zachary, the Park Ranger program, is that fully staffed, or are there plans to move up or down or sideways with that? What are we at right now with that?
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Rouse, we have 3 full-time equivalent staff approved in the budget. We have 2 staff that are on, and we recently lost one of the staff members, and we're about to complete a recruitment. We hope we have our 3rd park ranger on in June.
And Councilmember White.
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned in describing the addition of a Parks and Rec specialist that their program declines due to staffing challenges. Can you describe the epitome of that? What would give us a taste of what that issue is?
Mayor Hart, Councilmember White. Yes, I'd be happy to. Actually, we looked at the statistics, and that's for youth and adult contract classes and camps. If in fiscal year 09, we had approximately 3,800 registrations. And since that time, we had a couple years, of course, when the Career Recreation Center was closed. Large number of the programs, those programs are held in that facility. When the facility was closed, and of course the registrations dropped accordingly. And we did see a small bump up after the facility opened, but since that fiscal year 09, and at that same time we'd cut a staff person who was working specifically with the contractors and bringing in new classes and working with the people who were our current instructors. Actually, we've seen a 61% decrease. So we've gone from 3,800 to, we're projecting to finish June of this year to 1,500 registrations. So we just we do not have the staff resources to increase that revenue back to where it was, even though our facility is better than it's ever been. So that's why we're asking for this service enhancement to bring back this position that was reduced.
And those would be the dance classes kind of thing?
Dance classes.
And the rec center is the center of that?
Primarily dance and fitness classes, some camps and programs that are held, say, in our arts and crafts center, But it's a large number of our youth and adult contract classes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hotchkiss.
Thank you, sir. Conversion to artificial turf is pretty elaborate, is it not?
Mayor Hart, Councilmember Hotchkiss, it can be. Then there are a number of issues to take into consideration in terms of
Well, it's
cost.
drainage and upkeep and all that stuff.
Drainage, engineering of it, the best locations. And that's why we've always said, well, of the 4 different areas we have in the city, Dwight Murphy, Ortega Park, Bonnet, and Mackenzie, is that right? Yes. Where would we do that?
And where do you
What
think
does
right
it
now?
mean?
Where do you think, what's the most likely? I saw Dwight Murphy, but then you mentioned Bonnet Park.
Well, Bonnet Park, it was a priority of the council for us to look at last year. And as we've been looking at it, I would like to add that we just are about to reopen the park. We did a major turf enhancement project just to carry us, hopefully tide us over until we have more information on that site. Dwight Murphy presents a unique opportunity because it really is a sports field facility. Bonnet Park is a neighborhood park, and so it's used by a variety of different park users, and it's quite small. Dwight Murphy, in terms of its size and its current use as a sports facility, we think provides some great opportunity just logistically and programming-wise. There are clearly other considerations, including how would you engineer it in an area that could be subject to flooding. And then also increasingly we've heard there's concerns about sort of environmental considerations with artificial turf and health considerations. So our approach is really to look at the feasibility of it from a design and engineering standpoint, and then also look at it from a program management and operating standpoint. Once you put in a field like that, you do have to fence it, and you could limit general public access to an area, figuring out how we would best program something.
Would that exclude Bonnet Park then, necessarily?
Councilmember Hotchkiss, no, that's part of the whole analysis. It's just looking at, it's similar to our concept with looking at developing a master plan or the feasibility study we did for off-leash dog areas. We kind of looked at all the potential sites and then started doing a cost-benefit consideration. And we hope that through that process, we'll be able to come forward with some good recommendations.
Well, just anecdotally, Bonnet Park is eternally brown, it seems, despite every effort, because it gets such intense usage. And even when you put new turf in, a few months later, it's gone.
Mayor Hart and Commissioner Hotchkiss, and I would address this to all of the council. I think that when we've thought about Bonnet Park and putting artificial turf in there, we have always anticipated that we would bring all of the information forward to you so that you could look at what that cost would be and what the value and the trade-off to the community would be, because it will be significant. Artificial turf is really the only option to have good turf available as a playing surface at that park, which is undersized and
overused.
Overused, and it always will be. So it may be that what we would bring you is it's not going to be as cost efficient as doing a project at Dwight Murphy, but it'll be a different kind of a project, and you'll have to weigh that cost benefit. And that's kind of how we've talked to people in the community about it too. It may just be that we have to really look at some of those tough questions. And as Ms. Zachary's has pointed out, we've also been, most of the artificial surfaces are fenced in. And that would also change Bonnet Park. So there are a lot of pieces to this that we are researching and expect to bring back for that conversation, because it will be a very difficult conversation.
When will that be? Any idea?
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Hotchkiss, we anticipate coming back with sort of a feasibility and some preliminary concepts in fiscal year 16. When exactly, we have to do some preliminary work, so it would likely probably be in the winter
Thank you.
part of the year.
Any other questions from Ms. Zachary? Councilmember White?
Just to follow up on that dramatic drop in activities, I'm curious to here, and not even necessarily now, but you folks obviously have been studying that and have a sense of why, and is it just the lack of staff? I mean, we obviously saw the experience with the golf course, where there's a national trend there. Is this a national trend? So it's obviously a big drop. That's dramatic, and so warrants another look.
Mayor Hart, Councilmember White, I can make a few more comments regarding that. It's kind of a number of different things that came together. When we were at our high point, of course, the facility closed for renovation. A lot of our contractors, we tried to move them to other facilities that we had, but a lot of them did have to move out into other facilities that we don't own. So, getting them back and building our revenue was a challenge. Of course, during the recession, we do have a few more competitors, though I will say the Carrillo Recreation Center is the most wonderful facility in the community, but we do have a few more competitors for dance and fitness classes. So I'd say that's part of it, in addition to the fact that we also did reduce that position when our facility closed. We reduced that position that was the person who was actively going out in the community and seeking new contractors, new instructors, and working with our existing ones to keep that program strong. We just haven't had the benefit of that for quite some time. And the existing staff has done the best that they can to continue to grow that program, but we really find with the additional competition in the community, we need some additional staffing resources in that area to go back up to where we were, because we have always had a very vibrant program in that area.
Mayor Hart, Councilmember White, and Council, I have had a lot of experience over the years with recreation class programs throughout my career. And the secret to a successful, both financially and from a participation perspective, is you need to offer what's new, what's trendy, and do it well. And it's a program that is continually evolving as trends change, as you change instructors and you bring on fresh ideas, fresh blood, and you're continually tweaking that program in order to make it new and exciting. I believe in this community there is a significant opportunity to grow that program. We find that. We do have success with new activities. If you look at our summer camps that we offer through our youth activities and aquatics and sports, they are new ideas, they're popular, they're growing. It's the same concept, but in the 4, 6 week, 8 week class concept. And we just haven't had the staff to put attention to that. And that has been our challenge. And I don't think we even realized what that significant drop had been until Mrs. McCaffrey did that research and looked back since 2009. We knew it was having an effect on revenue. This is one of those areas like our beachfront facility rentals where that was our cushion. Every year that was our cushion because the programs were growing, the revenue was good, and that we've just been feeling the pinch of that. But that's really how those programs are successful. It's very different from golf, where it would be a trend down. That is not what we're seeing and hearing in other communities.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Rapp, I think you have a few more slides.
Yes, I do. Mayor and Council, we did receive 2 outside agency funding requests. One I have slides for. The other was a request that we just received today. So I'm going to talk about it, and tomorrow I will email you the formal request. When you met with the Santa Barbara Unified School District School Board, City Council and School Board meeting, you had a presentation on the junior high after-school program and the successes that they've had there, and they indicated that they would like some additional funding. We have received their request, which is for an additional $12,000, which would grow the city's commitment from $20,000 to $32,000. And again, and I don't have updated numbers as to what they're actually projecting for this school year, but just growing from 229 students last school year, and through February they were at 853. So clearly, the model that we have gone back to with the junior high after school teachers being key to running the programs on their various campuses, that always was the key to having a strong program. It's working. So I, however, wanted to add a little bit additional information for you just to help frame the discussion. The program budget for the junior high after school sports program, the program's been around, I'm going to say, between 25 and 30 years. It was the first joint effort funded equally by the city and the school board. And each agency, the total budget was $85,000. And so that's what that amount has been. That's what it still is. That's all that the budget is. But the funding has changed over the years as the school district went through financial challenges. The city went through financial challenges. We've gone from the city trying to make it a user fee-based program. That failed. Then we took on, okay, we'll subsidize it and operate it with the money that we have. We had budget cuts, pulled back. The Police Activities League stepped in and said they would administer and operate the program, and they did that. And then just recently, the school district said again, we want to take it back and put it on. Throughout all of that over the last few years, the city's commitment has been $20,000. However, and at some point, history is history, but I do want to just kind of revisit what the city's general fund commitment is to after-school programs offered in cooperation with the school district. So and these numbers do not include any grant funds or donations, mostly grant funds. When we look at the AOK program, that $47,000 is a straight contribution to the AOK program that is the city's portion of the match for the state education department grant to operate that program. So it's a very small portion of the budget. Plus, we provide services on contract to the school district and get reimbursed by the state grant fund. That is not included in that number. So this is a straight contribution from the city to the AOK program. The city provides $50,000 in scholarship funds for the recreation after-school program, which is the fee-based program that we operate at the schools which do not have the state grant-funded program. And the after-school sports program, which is also a program that was fee-based. We operate that on the elementary school campuses, and now it's offered at no cost, so we subsidize it totally. Almost $82,000 a year that the city puts into that program that operates on the school campuses. And the junior high after-school sports program, we commit $20,000. The city of Goleta contributes $13,000, which is towards the Goleta Valley Junior High. And then the district is funding $52,000. So I provide this information for you only in context, and because of so many times I've sat here in this chair and either said, okay, we'll take the cut, or please give us more or whatever. But I think it's important to just recognize how the city has responded and funded after-school programs. We support the school district request for additional funding. Clearly, what they're doing is working. In different presentations to different councils and school boards over the years, ultimately what it always comes down to is we need more kids engaged in programs on campus after school. This one's working. And I feel very comfortable in saying I think it's a legitimate request for funding. And we would also hope that they would go and ask the city of Goleta to also increase their funding for the program. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the school district request. Today, we received a letter from the Police Activities League, and they currently lease the 1235 Teen Center, and that lease involves an annual lease payment of just under $10,000. And they are asking that that lease payment be modified to be $1 a year. So what that would mean is a significant savings for them, and they are saying they would put that money back into programs that they are offering for youth. So with that, it's important to revisit how the Police Activities League came to be operating the Teen Center. So in 2010, the Parks and Recreation Department was challenged, as the city was, with less money to run programs and services. And we had many discussions with our various partners, and the Police Activities League stepped up in 2 different times and said, we will help. When Parks and Recreation had to cut the position that ran the junior high after-school sports program, PAL stepped in and they said they would take on the administration of that program. That was a savings to the general fund of $45,000 plus on an annual basis. And then a little bit later, when the cuts got worse, the Police Activities League agreed to step in and take over the operation of the Teen Center and to continue the level of programming at their cost for teens in the community. So with that, the savings to the general fund was over $156,000, and those savings continue currently. At the time that the lease was being discussed, there was a request that the city consider converting that lease to $1 a year, since they were providing programs and services that the city would have been providing. And city administrator at that time, Jim Armstrong, was in favor of that. However, he felt that we needed to see how it worked. There were concerns initially with the transition of moving from the city operating the Teen Center to the Police Activities League operating the Teen Center. And so basically they were told, let's wait, let's see how it works out, and then we'll revisit it. So since 2010, I would feel very comfortable in saying to you that the Police Activities League has done everything that they've said that they would do and more. In their letter, they say that they have, since 2010, served 1,000 teens, unduplicated teens, since 2010. And on a daily basis, they serve 25 to 30 teens at the Teen Center. We continue to partner with them for many activities, and they run a full breadth of programming at the Teen Center. The first few years, we actually had a advisory committee that included youth council members, And over the years, there were such non-issues that the youth council said, actually, we're fine. We don't need to have that advisory committee. We feel confident in how that's going. We do continue to have an annual report that is presented to the Park and Recreation Commission on the Police Activities League and their operation of the Teen Center. So again, that would be a request for waiving the rental income and the lease cost, which for Parks and Recreation, because that revenue is included in our current budget, would mean that we would look to be held revenue neutral from that reduction. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions. I think those were the key points. And I will forward that request to you tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Murillo?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And isn't it true, Ms. Rapp, that the city does not fund PAL in any other way? I've had a meeting with them before, and they're funded through private donation.
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Murillo, that is correct. That is correct as far as I know. I do know that they do occasionally get human services funding for different programs that they operate. So other than that, they don't get any support from the city.
Okay. There's been some talk about our youth council doing an annual report to the council at the end of the school year, that's when they make their transition. And the mayor was amenable to that. So maybe the PAL youth could be part of that. They do a lot there, I know. And unless you're paying attention, we wouldn't really know what they were doing. I think I'm in support of it. I need to look at your email. I do support the request from the school district. Thank you for your explanation about all the different programming and funding. May I ask, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Zachary, I didn't ask why the recreation specialist is not full-time but 0.8. And my second question is, what are the security problems at Chase Palm Park? Though I can probably imagine what they are.
Mayor Hart, Councilmember Murillo, I will answer the Chase Palm Park if that's okay, and then perhaps Judith McCaffrey can speak more to the 0.8 recreation specialist. At Chase Palm Park, wonderful park, one of the things that was designed into the park is locating the fence along Cabrillo Boulevard. That fence line is about 3 feet from the edge of the curb. And what we're finding is people are increasingly using that as an informal walkway. It puts them in close proximity to cars rather than being on the south side of the street. And
so not the beach side, the other side.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So our proposal would be to relocate that fence toward the street and actually improve another pathway inside the park to try and encourage people to either stay in the park or go across the street. And we've actually met with the Transportation Division and talked about how we would like to move that forward. We have other needs at that park, but that is our highest priority right now.
Thank you.
Mayor Hart and Councilmember Murillo, I will address the issue of why we are only proposing a 0.8 FTE for the recreation specialist. It came down to we only had so much money to work with, to ask for the additional funding, the new funding, and what our priorities were. And we only had so much money to play with in our existing budget. So in answer to your question, could we use a full-time position? Yes. However, if we can carve out this funding at this time, it is such an enhancement over what we have. So it really just came down to we couldn't figure out a way to fund a full-time position. So this is a start. And I would say that normally this would be a position that we would say we'll cover it by revenue because the expectation is we'll be generating additional revenue. However, I have advised, I think this position is protecting our existing revenue to not see any more declines. And I believe that in future years, we will see those program revenues increase. And in fact, in the future, we will probably be able to fund increasing that position to full-time if, in fact, it is needed.
You might attract a better person if it was a full-time job. Mr. Casey, may I ask that when you come back, can you give us the option of making it a full-time position? Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember White?
The whole package of funding that the city does with the school district, how does that compare to, I'm curious about how that compares to other school districts and cities. Is that partnership in scale, et cetera, et cetera?
Mayor Hart and Councilmember White, I can't speak to with any detail at all what other cities and their school districts do in terms of jointly funding programs and who puts what in. I can say that we actually, our joint use agreement with the school district has been highlighted as one of the more effective joint use agreements in, the state and other areas. What has been unique about our joint use efforts is the fact that both have been willing to fund after-school programs. So I do know that when I speak with other directors in other communities, they don't have this sense of shared investment in the after-school program. So I can't say it across the board, but I do know that what we do has always been a standout from many other communities. And we've been doing this for, the junior high program is the oldest, and the elementary school program probably has been in place since 1995. And in 2000, we introduced the AOK program and separated out into the AOK and RAP. So it's been a number of years where we have jointly invested in after-school programs.
Well, and I don't doubt that they're, excellent. However, I do contemplate the disillusionment or this disillusion, the destruction of RDA was the school district was a primary beneficiary of that. No, I see Mr. Casey shaking his head.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, council members, the state was the beneficiary. It was kind of a zero-sum game for the school district. So even though the school district got some of the property tax revenue back, the state then reduced their state allocation.
Okay.
And so the school district had some one-time money that they benefited from, but from an ongoing basis, they were kind of held harmless.
Okay, thank you.
We have one speaker slip. We have Leslie Wiscombe, representing the Parks and Recreation Commission. Ms. Wiscombe, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Leslie Wiscombe. I'm chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And the Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed the proposed FY 2016-17 Parks and Recreation budget at the regular meeting on April 22nd. At that meeting, and as outlined in a subsequent memo to you, the Commission recommends that City Council approve the proposed FY 16-17 revenue, expense, and capital budgets for the Creeks Fund, Golf Fund, and Parks and Recreation General Fund, and the proposed fees and charges schedule for both the Golf Fund and the Parks and Recreation General Fund. Commissioners praised the Creek staff for their ongoing success, successes and innovative programs that educate residents and improve our water quality, and the Gulf Fund for the proposed budget that should begin to rebuild reserves and increase rounds in revenue. We also complimented department staff for developing a budget that is responsive to improving program safety, staff efficiency, customer service, capital program advancement, and last but not least, revenue generation. The Commission is particularly supportive of the proposed increase of 3.6 FTE in personnel that brings back some of the positions that the department lost in the large cutbacks in the economic downturn. The emphasis is on restoration of FTE personnel. Restoration as proposed will improve efficiency, service, and safety by providing support to many of our busy programs and growing revenue that is presently challenged by limits in staffing. As well, the restoration of the proposed capital project supervisor allows the department to efficiently manage the unique challenges in timelines, budgets, and expectations that undoubtedly arise in individual projects. It is particularly important given the growing capital program that we have and the upcoming large renovation of the Cabrillo Bathhouse and Pavilion. Therefore, the Parks and Recreation Commission recommends that City Council adopt the proposed FY 2016-17 budget as presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wiscombe. Please give our thanks to the other commissioners, too, for all your excellent service. And I think Councilmember White has a question. Oh, okay. Never mind. Then Councilmember White.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you to touch on our trees. Obviously, we're headed into a really bad time the next till hopefully we get a decent winter next year. But how? And I'm imagining that there needs to be more money to be spent there to tend to those 35,000 trees. Could you speak to that, please?
Mr. Mayor and Councilmember White, since the department developed its drought plan in response to stage 2 and now looking ahead to stage 3, we've done a number of things with our forestry program. We have been documenting and evaluating the resources it takes to water trees. We have a good sense of the trees that are most sensitive to drought, and of our inventory, there's around 700 that are most sensitive. We've increased our water efficiencies in terms of using irrigates and gator bags. You've probably seen those around town. And then we've reassigned some staff at peak times to do watering. One of the things that we're evaluating right now, and as part of our drought update, we'll have further recommendations on, is should we be increasing our equipment, so another water trailer, and further redirecting existing staff, but then analyzing what impact that will have on our other operations. We do know that we are able, and we have been able to essentially consistently water 1,000 trees. A lot of those are duplicated trees. So because it's a young tree, it has to get watered every 2 weeks versus once a year and you're done. We're trying through the Gator Bag program to increase those efficiencies so we can get staff out to other more mature trees that we're seeing are in decline. That's one of the approaches. So looking at, is it staff needs or just equipment, and redirecting existing staff. And then also when we presented to the commission our strategy for historic and specimen trees, we looked at an infrastructure analysis we did and realized that if we could actually physically remove some of the hardscape that's been cropping up in all of our parkways around town, that alone should help the health of the trees, even if they don't get water on a regular basis. So that's part of why we're proposing through our capital program to begin chipping away at that. We know we have detailed information about 7 of our 7 downtown neighborhoods where we have infrastructure issues, hardscape issues, and need to sort of return parkways to what they're supposed to be.
Thank you for that. That is a place where I really am concerned to look out in October, November, and see ourselves with hundreds of trees that, I mean, we sort of got that shock treatment on Anapamu Street whenever that was, last fall, was that right? Was kind of when we hit that. Well, this is even though we had that nice bit of rain early, things just in the natural world just don't feel good, and I'm worried that we're not. I want us not to be behind the curve on that come the fall, and that we're looking at losing hundreds of trees. At least I would be supporting a focused effort to stay with that wonderful resource that we have.
Any other comments or questions? I just want to echo Councilmember White's concern about that. I've sort of noticed it myself driving around. Trees do look, something has changed in even this last few months, that there's significant stress. It's probably 3-4 years now of underwatering, and they're starting to really bear that. And it's such an incredibly expensive and valuable resource that it would be penny wise and pound foolish to miss. And the gator bags and the irricades have demonstrated that we can do something. And I think people are very understanding of that this is a different situation than lawns. This is irreplaceable. This is incredibly valuable. And we definitely think this deserves fast attention if we can, even before the fall, because I think the summer is going to be really tough on those trees. So with that, I don't believe we have any other speaker slips or any other questions or comments. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.